These are the solutions for the study guide for Chapter 2, Section 3, and Chapter 2, Section 4 quiz. And so let's take a look at the first type of problem. It's going to ask us to determine or explain whether the shaded figure is the reflection of the non-shaded figure. And so as we look at that, what we're looking for is a mirror image. And so a mirror image means that you're going to end up having points that are equal distance to this line of reflection. And so if I look at a point like right here, it should be exactly equal distance to the line of reflection as the image is, and we see that it is. And same thing over here. So you see how this is back a little ways, and it's about the same distance. So I would say yes, the image reflected over the line of reflection. So let's take a look at the next one, and we see that this image, we have the line of reflection going in an angle, and that's okay. But again, you're looking for corresponding points. And so I see this point right here kind of corresponds to a point that's way over here. And you see how this point is very close to that line of reflection, where this other point is much further from that line of reflection. So in this case, I would say no, the figure slid, or translated, we'll say. No, the figure translated down and right. So definitely not a reflection there. So on this next problem, they're asking us to actually plot some points and then reflect it across an axis. And here they're asking us to draw the figure and reflect across the x-axis. So you're going to have two problems on the test that you'll see, and one is across the x and one across the y. So we first need to plot the points. So 1 over 2 up, and once we plot that, let's put A, and then over 3 up 2, let's put B, and then over 1 up 4, and we'll put C. And we'll connect those points with lines, and then we'll reflect it. So when I reflect across the x-axis, it's going up and down. So you just count the spaces to the x-axis. So make sure you see what the x-axis is, because they have these numbers and it gets a little confusing. So look for the arrows, and that means that this is the line we're looking at. So 2 spaces from the x-axis brings us 2 spaces down, and that would be A prime. 4 spaces from the x-axis brings us 4 spaces down, that'd be C prime, and B prime is 2 spaces from the x-axis, so 2 spaces down. And so then we draw the figure, and what we'll notice is when we're plotting the points, because it says what are the coordinates? Coordinates mean the ordered pairs. So notice that with all these values, the numbers are the same, except what changes is the y component. The y component changes to its opposite sign, and that's what you see when it crosses the x-axis. So B prime, same thing, 3, 2, but it's now 2 spaces down, so it's negative 2. C prime, well, it's 1, 4, but since it's down 4, that means it's a negative 4. So let's take a look at the next one. This one's across the y-axis, so we first start by plotting some points. 2 over 2 up, so that's M. And then 2 over 3 up, that is N. And then 3 over 3 up, that is P. And then 4 over, just 1 up, is Q. And then we go ahead and draw the figure. And from that point, we need to go ahead and reflect across the y-axis this time. So I'm going to count the spaces. So it looks like it's 2 spaces over, so that's going to be N prime. M prime is 2 spaces over. P prime is, looks like 3 spaces from that line of symmetry. And Q prime is 4 spaces from that line of symmetry. And then just draw the figure. So when we draw it, it should look exactly the same, which it is, except that it is a mirror image of the other. So notice that when we're coming up with these points, M prime is going to have the same y value, but opposite x, because we reflect it across the y-axis, which just changes it to the other side, so x value switches signs. Y value stays the same. So N prime is going to end up being negative 2, 3. P prime is going to be negative 3, 3. And we have Q prime, and that's going to be negative 4, comma 1. Well, the next problem says find the coordinates of the figure after the transformation. So we reflect the triangle across the y-axis. And so we see that this point here is, looks like 4 spaces over, so 4 spaces on the other side. And I'm going to just call that, actually I'll call that C prime. And then B prime, it's going to be 1 space from it, so 1 space over, so there's B prime. And A, or here's, actually, I was looking at this and saw that as a B, so let's fix that right now. That is an A prime. B prime is going to be 2 spaces over from that line of reflection. Now, I'm just going to draw a dashed line, so it's really light so you can kind of see where it is. So there's the reflection that we saw. Now it says to translate the figure 1 unit left, 3 units down. So 1 unit left would be to the left here, and I'll do this in a different color so we can see it. So 1 unit left, and then I have 3 down. So 1, 2, 3. That's where C double prime is going to be. A double prime, 1 unit left, 3 down. So it puts me right there. A double prime, and B was here, so 1 unit left, 3 units down. And that puts me there. And so again, as you look at it, you should see the same image, just in a different location. And it was reflected and translated. And so it tells us to find the coordinates. So we have to write those coordinates down. So we have to write A double prime is going to end up being negative 2, 0. And B double prime looks like that is 1 space to the right and 2 spaces down. And C double prime, well, that one is 5 spaces left, and we had 1 space down. So then they want us to write the rule. So the rule for the reflection, remember when we reflect across the y-axis, the x values change to their opposite side. So it's negative xy is the reflection. The rule for the translation, well, that's just whatever they tell us to do. X, you go 1 unit left. So you take the x value, go 1 unit left, and you take the y value. Oops, I need to get rid of that parenthesis there. So I still have a y value to do. Y value, you have to go 3 units down. So that means minus 3. So that would be my rule. And you can check to see if it works. See if I check with one of these points, 4, 2. So this was the C value. Let's see what it becomes. It should match the C prime. So 4, 2, okay, when I went ahead and did this, I got negative 4, comma 2. And then I took the x value, which was negative 4, and I took away 1. That's what it said here, negative 4. And I took the y value, 2, took away 3. And let's see what I get. That makes negative 5, negative 1. And that matches. That matches the point I have right here. So let's take a look at the next problem. And it's right here. And so it says, tell whether the figure shows a rotation about the origin. If so, give the angles and the direction. So when we look at this, I see Z is up here on the top, but now it's on the bottom. T, and notice it went exactly 180 degrees. T, well, it's over in the first quadrant, but now it's in the third quadrant, so it went 180 degrees. And Z, well, it was in the second, so it went 90 to 180 degrees in that next quadrant. So we would call this one 180 degrees. And it doesn't matter which direction we go, because when we go 180 degrees, it could either be clockwise or counterclockwise. And that would get us in that same exact spot. It would make a difference, though, if it were 90 degrees. So let's take a look at the next one. It says the vertices of the triangle A is 1, 1. B is 3, 1. And C is 3, 4. And so from there, let's see what it asks us to do. It says plot the figure, which we did. Now rotate the triangle as described. Find the coordinates of the image. So 90 degrees clockwise. So clockwise means that I need to go to the right. So this is clockwise. So remember, this axis right here, the y-axis, is going to end up going down here to the x-axis. And so this x-axis is going to end up going down here. So that's what I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at this x-axis right here, which now becomes the negative y-axis. And look where A and B are. So A and B are in line with this axis. And when it goes down to the other side, it needs to also be in line with that axis. So A and B are going to be in line with the axes that they were in line with them originally, because all we are doing here is rotating the entire image. We're fixing this right in this quadrant here. We're fixing this, but the whole quadrant's shifting. So you see A and B are going to be exactly parallel with this axis, just as they were with this axis here. So here is A prime. Here is B prime. Now C is jetting out away from that x-axis. So the x-axis becomes the y-axis here, the negative y. So it needs to jet out away from that. And so it's going to be in this location right here. That's C prime. And so there we have it. So when we write the rule, let's take a look at one of the points. Let's take a look at C. C is 3, 4, but then it goes to C prime, which is 4, negative 3. So what's happening? Well, the x and the y values switch, but something else happens here as well. So notice the x value became negative when we went ahead and switched it. So we're going to put a minus sign there. Let's take a look at our next one, and it says that the two figures are congruent. Describe sequence of two transformations that place the shaded figure on top of the non-shaded. So this is the one we're looking at here. So we're going to start with this figure, and let's go ahead and do a rotation. Now notice that it went into, and it looks like it rotates because it's not going the same direction. So I'm just going to rotate it clockwise, or actually counterclockwise. Let's go 90 degrees counterclockwise. And so when I do that, this 3, negative 1, is going to end up being over in this location right here. And it's going to be 3 up, though. It's going to be right here. So notice this axis is going to shift up. The x-axis becomes the y-axis. So if you look at that, 3, negative 1 is going to become 1, 3. And then notice this point right here is just in line right across from the 7 there. So it's going to end up being up in this direction right there. And then this point right here is, let's take a look at with respect to this axis, which is coming up here on which will become the y-axis. So it's 1 over, but 3 across. So 1 up, I guess, and then 3 across puts me right there. And then this point here, that's 5. So I go up to 5 and then over to 3. So that's where it is. But then we had another transformation. So what else happened? Well, it looks like this image just goes down 1 space. So then translate, so actually I should say rotate here. Rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise, then translate 1 down and 0 left or right. So I don't even need to say that. I'm just going to say 1 down, and that'll be enough. So let's take a look at the next one here. And this one is just solving an equation, so I'm just distributing. And now when I do that, I've got negative 3h plus 12. Make sure you have a positive 12 there, because I've got the negative times the negative. And I'm going to go collect some like terms here. And so that's going to give me negative 3h plus 15 equals negative 3. And now I'll do the opposite operations. So when I do that, notice how we have the same sign there. So I end up having to add, and I get negative 18 equals negative 3h. And I divide by the negative 3, and the signs switch. H is 6. And so they say to check. And so my check is just substituting in. Negative 3 times 6 minus 4 plus 3 should equal negative 3. So order of operations says I'll go ahead and do the work inside the parentheses. And then I'll go ahead and multiply. It makes negative 6. And then I'll subtract, or actually add these two, but since they're opposite signs, I subtract. And when you get the same number equaling, you know it's the same. It says the perimeters are equal. So we're supposed to find out what x is. So I have 2x plus 4, 2x plus 3, and a 2x. I'm going to add up all these numbers to find the perimeter. And so the perimeter is just the sum of all these. So that makes 6x plus 7. I'll do the same thing with this one. 2x, 2x, and 3x plus 1. So this is just the perimeter of this. And I add those numbers up, I get 7x plus 1. So they're saying that they equal. See, it says the perimeters are equal. So when we go ahead and solve, I'll just do some opposite operations here. So I've got now 7 equals 1x plus 1. And then I'll subtract the 1. Leaves me with 6 equals x, and that is what x is. But then they say, Let's see, it says find the perimeter of the triangle on the left. It really doesn't matter which triangle you find since they're equal to one another, but we'll do the one on the left here. So this one is 6 times 2. So I'm going 6 times 2 plus 4. So 12 plus 4, that gives me 16. So I'll just circle that right there, and then I do 6 times 2 plus 3, so that's going to give me 15, and then just 2 times by 6, and that gives me 12. So those are the numbers there. And then find the value of t, and then find the angle measures of the polygon. So I know that t plus 10.5 plus 2t is going to, plus the 90-degree angle is going to equal 180 degrees. So when I go ahead and collect some like terms, I get 3t plus 105 tenths equals 180. And so when I subtract that 105 tenths from both sides, I end up having to borrow a little bit, and I end up getting 79.5 equals 3t. Oops, it's a t instead of an x. And from that point, I'll just divide by 3. So I see 3 goes into this evenly, and it ends up, actually, not quite, it doesn't quite go in there evenly. It makes 26 and 5 tenths when I go ahead and do that division. And so that's going to end up being the value of t. But then they say find the angle measures. Well, when we plug in, we got 26 and 5 tenths plus 10 and 5 tenths. That's going to end up giving me 37 degrees. So 37 degrees there. And then when I do 26 and 5 tenths times by 2, that gives me 53 degrees for this one. And this one I know is 90 degrees. So those are the types of problems you'll see on the test. Good luck.